Common sense ain't that common anymore. Seems common sense is past tense, just like the dinosaur. Political correctness has got a lot to answer for, 'cause common sense ain't that common anymore.
Oh, yeah.
Now on weekends, the Treasury of Common Sense.
Look, the great philosopher Kevin Bloody Wilson. What a gem. What a gem. How are you, Lee?
Good, thanks, Jason.
The other philosopher we have on this program. I love your website. I learned about it from Luke's program, so I guess I'm a follower. Not quite a subscriber yet. That's still to come. But great to talk to you finally. Good on you.
Yeah, cheers, Jason. I'll have to give you a sub.
No. Take the money, honestly. Take the money. Look, I like particularly when you look at some of the madness of the population. We'll call it the debate, but you know there's no debate. It's just the population increase. But the byproducts of all of these things we always look past. And one of the things that stands out, it's a glaring thing, is the impact, particularly on older people. We always talk about the younger people going to homes and everything like that. There's an impact on the older population as well. And there's a crisis coming around the corner at us very quickly with respect to superannuation.
That's right, yeah. And our retirement system more generally, which, let's face it, it's been built around the presumption that most people are going to own the home outright when they retire. But, you know, with housing becoming increasingly expensive, both to purchase and rent, outright home ownership is becoming, let's be honest, a distant dream. So we're going to have, you know, a lot of people renting in the future that previously would have purchased a home. And we're also going to have a lot of people holding mortgage debt deep into their retirement because it's so expensive to purchase a home now, which means that you're just going to be carrying this massive mortgage debt for, you know, possibly a generation. And then when it's time to retire, you've got to pay off that mortgage debt. Now, both these factors threaten the very existence of our retirement system. And there was research released this week by Super Consumers Australia, and it found that the typical single retiree who pays rent needs twice as much super to enjoy a financially secure retirement as somebody who owns a home outright. Now, that's not, you know, rocket science. Obviously, if you own your home outright, you're not paying rent, you're just paying upkeep on your home. Versus renting, which is a lot more expensive, or indeed paying off a mortgage. And, this research showed that renters are 3 times more likely to struggle financially in retirement. And, you know, while only 10% of retired homeowners are in financial stress, nearly half of renting retirees are in financial stress. And this research has come at the same time as the median advertised rent nationally. It surged by nearly 44%. Over the past 5 years. Now, that's obviously that's massively outpaced wages, superannuation growth, etc. And according to Cotality's latest housing affordability report that was released last month, they suggest that the typical tenant household today is paying around $10,600 more annually to rent the median advertised home than they did 5 years ago. So obviously that's money that you can't put to other use, you can't save. It means if you move into a new rental as you're older, you have to pay a lot more, and you're going to be under stress, especially if you're relying on the age pension, that sort of thing. And data this week by Domain also showed that households now need to earn $112,000 on average to comfortably rent the median priced home in Australia, which is, you know, a significant amount of money. And at the same time, the Super Members Council of Australia last year also released a separate report, and it showed that 40% of Australians retire with mortgage debt. And that was up from 16% 2 decades ago. And there's been a massive increase in Australians aged 55 to 64 or 45 to 54 who are holding mortgage debt. Now, those people are obviously going to be moving into retirement in the next decade or so. So it's a real question here. How are they going to fund their retirements? And according to Super Members Council of Australia, they warn that 50% of individuals and about 1/3 of couples are going to utilise their entire superannuation nest egg just to pay the mortgages on their homes when they retire, which means they're not going to have that super for other stuff.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm 53, Leith, so I guess by law I've got another 15 years to work until I hit the magical new retirement age. And I look at that and think, I know plenty of people, and plenty of my mates say this, that their budget plan to pay off their mortgage is inheritance.
Yep, not surprised.
That is disgraceful. I mean, not disgraceful for them, but it is a disgraceful reality that we're counting on mum and dad carking it in order to get the money. I mean, it's just horrible. What kind of a country have we made this?
Yeah, absolutely. It sort of makes Australia more of a class system, whereby you need inherited wealth to basically get ahead, and it's sort of a shift away from how it used to be when we used to be an egalitarian country, and you could basically start with nothing and purchase a home for a reasonable income. With a reasonable income, and then retire, reasonably comfortably. But we just can't do that these days. And in fact, the Grattan Institute, they projected that the share of Australians aged 65 plus who own a home is going to fall from about 76% currently to about 57% by 2056. Now, this was research released several years ago, and given the boom in house prices and rents since then, I'm sure if they redid these numbers now, I think this was pre-pandemic they put this out. I suspect the figures would be even worse. And the fact of the matter is, with house prices and rents continuing to rise faster than incomes, a growing share of Australian retirees are going to rent in the future. We're also going to be shouldering larger mortgage debts. And both developments are, quite frankly, threaten to blow up the retirement system, which, again, is built around the presumption that most people will own their homes outright when they retire, which is becoming no longer the case.
Bit of a myth sometimes, yeah. I hear this phrase said often, it's the unintended consequences. But you buy that if indeed this stuff is not obvious. Everything you're saying is obvious, and you would hope that the dimwits that are passing legislation to allow the country to shift and change in the manner that we are actually have a thought beyond the press release that the intention of what they're doing is to have all these impacts on people who actually should be having a reasonably comfortable life.
Yeah, and unfortunately, Australia's going in the opposite direction, obviously, and housing is just one area. But we are again becoming this sort of class system country whereby you need to have, inherited wealth of parents who are reasonably wealthy and then pass their wealth down to you for you to get ahead for a lot of people. Obviously, not everyone's in that boat, but I'm generalising here. And that's a far cry for how it was, 30 years plus ago, even 20 years plus ago.
That's right. There's a big thing that's changed in Australia. And I think it's a bad thing that's changed, but a big thing. It used to be that there were generations of people who, the old phrase, came from nothing and made themselves something. I don't see too much of that now.
Yeah, it's becoming very, very hard. I mean, and cost of housing is just a classic. And I look at my own children. I've got 2 teenage kids, and they're going to have a much tougher time to try and achieve what I've achieved, just because it's so much harder now. And at the time when I bought my place, I was like, man, this is way too expensive compared to what my parents paid, for example. But it's every generation, it seems, is becoming less or poorer in a housing sense than the generation that came before them. Yeah. We've got less housing choice. More people are going to be stuffed into high-rise shoeboxes. More people are going to be forced to rent. It's they'll have to take out larger mortgages and be paying them off for longer periods of time. And it's just a disaster.
Yeah, mate, I'm listening to this and I'm thinking how horrible it is that it is now considered lucky to inherit, because to inherit means you're losing someone that matters to you most times. It's now considered lucky. It's a real big shift in, I'll say it's the culture of this country. It's a real big shift. And when I say they, we're not just talking Albo, it's the other mob as well. They have done this to us. Yeah,
and let's be honest, it's happened over, a quarter of a century, really.
Yep.
And unfortunately, it's happened on the back of, the biggest commodity boom in the nation's history, where we should be richer, but you've got to wonder, we certainly have squandered that free pass.
A question a little on notice, but I'm sure you off notice, but I'm sure you would know this. Is there still people moving north? The people from the south moving north, and that Queensland is still the boom state, and people are still wanting to go there and leave New South Wales and leave Victoria and head north. Is that still the pattern?
Yeah, absolutely. It is slowing down a little bit, and part of that's because Brisbane's now the second most expensive housing market in the country.
Yeah.
So 5 years ago, Brisbane had ridiculously cheap housing compared to Sydney and Melbourne. Now it's still below Sydney, but it's caught up, and it's more expensive than Melbourne now. So now we're starting to see, especially from Melbourne, less flow up north, but it's still quite a large receiver of migration from Southerners. It's just slowing down a bit, and I think the slowdown is predominantly this housing story.
Yeah, I mean, I asked the question because I was in central Queensland over the week, and as you always do, if you're curious, you have a look in the shopping windows of the real estate agents. And I was in Kingaroy and couldn't believe the house prices. And everyone in Kingaroy says you can't get a rental, house prices are going through the roof, the motels are full because people are full-time living in them. If you want to invest, have a look at Kingaroy.
Dwelling values have risen, have practically doubled since the pandemic.
Wow.
And rents have gone up by close to 50%. So it's become very, very expensive. I'm not so sure about Kingaroy, but I'm assuming all of Queensland is similar. But Brisbane certainly has experienced one of an almighty price boom. And as a result, it's become now a very expensive housing market.
It's incredible. All right, the clown of the week. I always like this. I actually think we're running out of clowns of the week.
I've heard this person a few times now, Treasurer Jim Chalmers, but he just keeps putting his foot in it. So a few weeks ago, I lambasted him because he boasted that Labor has delivered, quote, the longest period of consecutive real wage growth in almost a decade. And he also claimed that, quote, 4 out of every 5 jobs since Labor came to office are in the private sector. Now, both statements were highly misleading because real wages actually fell in the September quarter quite significantly. And they've also fallen since Labor came to office. So that's just, very loose with the truth. And on top of that, around 2/3 of the jobs that have been created since Labor came to power were in what's called the non-market sector. So that's basically, they can be private sector jobs in, say, the NDIS, but they're still government funded, effectively. And we're talking about the public service, which is obviously public service jobs, but also healthcare, social assistance, and education. They're called the non-market sector because they're primarily government funded. And 2/3 of the jobs since Labor came into office, roughly, have been in that non-market sector, and the traditional private sector has actually created very few jobs. So, I smashed Chalmers on that a few weeks ago, but he was back at it again this week, boasting twice on Twitter that Labor is delivering more housing, and he's sort of claiming that they're doing great compared to the coalition, etc. But the ABS data on net dwelling additions, that's basically, they released this quarterly report and it shows completions minus demolitions. So it's the additions to the housing stock. And what it shows is that housing supply has stalled under Labor and only 168,600 homes are added to the nation's housing stock in the year to September. Now, since the Albanese government came to office in mid-2022, annual dwelling additions have only averaged 161,400. That's 13% below the 185,700 average dwelling additions recorded under the previous coalition term. So we're talking when the coalition came in 2013 to mid-2022. So Labor's actually delivered 13% less new homes, additions. Now, meanwhile, this is the thing that Chalmers never mentions. Labor has delivered the biggest migration boom in the nation's history. So they've brought in way more people that need housing. So since Labor came to office, between mid-2022 and the March quarter this year, which is the latest available figures, 1.23 million net overseas migrants landed. And over Labor's first 1,005 days in office, net overseas migration averaged an astonishing 1,222 people every day.
That's
every
staggering.
day. Now, as a result, Australia's population has exploded by about 1.5 million since they came to office. So I just find this irritating when Treasurer Chalmers boasts about boosting housing supply when they're actually produce less, at the same time as they've ramped up the need for housing because they've literally imported 1,222 migrants a day since they've been to office, which is just, to me, it's just irritating. And the thing that annoys me about it...
Oh, irritating, you're being nice. I mean, when we're talking about the numbers there, there's another conversation which you don't go to an economist to talk about, but people are talking about in pubs and restaurants and sporting sidelines everywhere. It's the quality of people we are bringing to our country and whether indeed they will be part of our country or we're going to end up with enclaves everywhere. I mean, these are... you run an immigration program with respect to the people who are already here, surely, but we don't seem to be.
That's 100%, but also it's unfortunate because the way I'd like to see Australia's Treasurer be is to sort of be honest and upfront about the challenges that we face as a nation. So you don't have to put a positive spin on everything, especially when you're not in election mode. You've got a stomping majority. I think I'd like to see Treasurer Chalmers actually be honest and say, look, we're not doing well in this area, but here's what we need to fix it.
Yeah.
And I think, the problem with it is if you keep trying to put a positive spin on everything, you're basically undoing the need to take the harsh medicine and reform that we need to move the country forward.
Yeah.
So what he really should be doing is delivering the bad news and being a lot more, not be so political about it. There's no election for a couple of years. They've got a huge majority. Deliver the harsh medicine, but then use it as a way to argue to do X, Y, and Z to turn the situation around.
So true.
Because if you keep telling us everything is fine when it's not, you're not only going to make us angry, you're not only going to have me mouthing off on this segment, calling you out, but you're also weakening any calls for policy reform, because reform's what we really need. We need a whole bunch of action in a whole bunch of areas. And if it was being honest and upfront with us and saying, look, wages terrible, productivity's bad, therefore we need to do X, Y, and Z. We're not building enough houses. We need to, reduce immigration, bring the people we actually need. We need to do X, Y, and Z to boost housing supply. If he actually gave us the bad news, we'd be more willing to actually take the harsh medicine. But instead, he's painting everything as a positive, which means that, well, if everything's so good, why do we need to take the harsh medicine?
Yeah, that's right. We're being sort of, it's the Iraqi information minister strategy. Just keep telling people we're beating the Americans and maybe they'll believe us. It's crazy stuff. Hey, look, I love this segment. As a listener, I love it. It's great to talk to you. I have great admiration for what you do, Leith. So good on you and power on, my friend. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Appreciate it.
Good one. Leith Van Onselen, a regular on Luke's program, the Treasury of Common Sense. Can we play the Kevin Bloody Wilson song again? That's so good. It's so good.
Common sense ain't that common anymore.
Oh, it's so true.
Seems common sense is past tense, just like the dinosaur.
Oh, you speaking the truth.
Political correctness has got a lot to answer for, 'cause common sense